Hi, I'm Reverend Paula Skiles with the Unity Church of San Marcos. Welcome to the beginning of Advent, the season of joy and hope and love and peace and the birth of Christ and celebrations and all kinds of religions. And this month particularly, there are so many. So I want to start with a little story about a little 4-year-old girl who had just returned home from Sunday school, and she was so excited. And she was telling her parents about this perspective she had learned from Sunday school. She said the youngster was just overcome and amazed. She said that she learned in Sunday school that at the very first Christmas there was no Santa Claus, and that there were these 3 guys who had to ride camels all the way from somewhere far away in order to give the gifts to baby Jesus. And because Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer wasn't there, they had to have this big light in the sky to show them around. I don't know about you, but I just love the wonder of a small child. And to me, they can just see the magic wherever it is and for whatever form it comes in. And they don't get caught up in secular or spiritual or religious or any of those kinds of things. They just see the truth, and they love to see it and own it as something powerful and wonderful and amazing, wonderful. This reminds me of my favorite form of experiencing truth many times, believe it or not. It's in movies. And one of them at this time of year is called It's a Wonderful Life. And truly, it's a wonderful life that you and I can live. And this message is about helping you and I to retrieve that wonder of a child and to experience the hope of a life that is wonderful. Just in case you haven't seen the movie 600 times or more, I'm just going to share just a little bit of a gist of that It's a Wonderful Life. At the beginning, when it opens, there is a scene where the main character, George Bailey, is contemplating suicide because he is facing arrest and possibly prison, and he has just felt like a failure most of his life. And there are a couple of angels who are discussing just that, his life. And one of them is Clarence Oddbody. Clarence is being sent to try and help George. Now, Clarence, if you don't know it, has been an angel for over 200 years and still hasn't been able to earn his wings. He's sort of a bumbling angel, if you will. And in the process of, part of helping rather, George, is Clarence is given a synopsis of all the wonderful, wonderful good things that George has done in his life. And so we see, as an audience, that George has saved his brother from drowning, lost his hearing in one ear as a result, and that George has helped people in his town. He had suffered a beating in order to keep a pharmacist from sending poison to an ill child who had been, and he was, the pharmacist was grieving and not paying as much of attention and didn't realize what he had done. And these selfless acts, like he forgo college and a long planned trip to Europe in order to keep his bank from letting the Depression era events take it down and ruin the people in the town, and to keep, most importantly, to keep the town despot, Potter, from taking it over and leaving everyone in it essentially in poverty. So along the way, we see George has his childhood sweetheart, Mary, and they marry, and she stands by him, and they have a family, and she sticks with him through thick and thin, and George's life is not going to be, and hasn't been, easy. But even the love of Mary and his children are not really the pull he needs when he's considering that his bank has had a shortfall because the money has been lost by his by Bud, and he's a likely candidate for prison as a result of the revengeful and vengeful Potter. Bitterly, George just declares he wished he'd never been born. Clarence, his angel, is inspired and decides to show George just exactly what life would be like for those that he knew if he had never been born. And so we're carried through this nightmarish odyssey of experiences for all the people had he not intervened, and how he had not been there. And by the time he got to the end of it, George had this revelation, and he was overcome with the wonder and excitement and gratitude, and knew that his life had truly, even with all of its deprivations, had been a wonderful life. I find it interesting that this movie rests on the truth that our choices, which are based on our positive attitudes and like gratitude, along with a bit of divine help, are what save us from ourselves. And it is through a mind filled with hope that you and I can hold a perspective about the possibilities of growth, or even the good that can come and has come through our difficulties, our trials, our traumas, our tragedies, if you will. But George Bailey was a real people person and kind. Now, he was kind even when people weren't looking. And you and I probably know people that are like that. I'm sure you probably do. Because George is based on real people. He's not just a fictional character. But that kind of kindness isn't something you can just teach people. It's something that has to be modeled so people can catch it. There's a particular scene in the movie that shows the stuff George and Mary are made of. They've just gotten married and are headed off on their honeymoon, and George notices as they drive by the bank, there's a run. The people are just gathering and upset. And he recognizes it for what it is. It's a run on the bank. So he lets Mary know they need to go inside. And he says, come on in, folks. He unlocks the door and has everybody come in. And he has this really charming way about him. And he says, just remember, things are not as black as they look. Excuse me. So he uses the money that he and Mary were going to use for their honeymoon to take their honeymoon together. And he doles it out to these people so that they can be left with a sense of hope. And that's what George did. He gave these people hope in one of the bleakest times of history. So George had a wonderful life, yes. Jesus was like that too. He had a wonderful life. Now, if you and I were there living, which we weren't, but if you and I were there alive at the time Jesus was living, and I doubt that many of us would say that a life lived where you're constantly trying to help people to understand something that is so difficult to understand, or to live a life that is not easy to live, is a wonderful life. And I seriously doubt that we would also say that it was a wonderful life that led to a person who is crucified and beaten and tortured and dying as a result of those trying to teach people that the way of life is love. And yet, we might come to a different conclusion if you and I could see with the eyes of understanding the life that Jesus was living was really about one that was in touch with the pure, unconditional love of God and experiencing the grace and truth in its absolute pure form, connecting to human beings and offering them love and healing in lives that were threadbare, and being able to cross out the erroneous beliefs not only that he may have held, but to help other people do that as well. Things like experiencing a life that is resurrected in wholeness and love. I guarantee you, we might have a different opinion about a wonderful life. Because even though it wasn't easy, I'll bet it was awesome. Awesome to live that life. I know that in the moments when I've experienced those small touches of it, the magnificence and the beauty is just so powerful. I know it keeps me going. Jesus was constantly urging us to be sure that we looked to the true source, our true source of being, and that is spirit, for the choices we made and looking for the answers in life, and recognizing that what was popular or that was what was necessarily being taught wasn't necessarily where the answers lie. And so I wonder how many folks just sort of had to scratch their heads whenever Jesus would be teaching and he would come up with something unexpected, which he always did, because I believe you could expect that he would say something unexpected like this from Matthew 16, 25 and 26. He said, "For whoever would save his life will lose it, and whoever loses his life for my sake will find it. For what will it profit a man if he gains the whole world and forfeits his life? Or what shall a man give in return for his life?" Okay, so these little statements are very powerful, and yet they speak to something that Jesus was about. How can you lose your life? How can you save it? And what does he mean by forfeit your life because you're gaining the world? What is all this? And what does he mean? What would you give? Well, let's think about that for a second. Let's use George's life example just as an example, because I think, don't you think that what we saw in that movie and the little bit I've expressed talks about that kind of life? He made his choices based on virtually every person's needs, including himself, and making sure that he was able to help. And his choices were based on being of help and being loving and giving. And George's circumstances didn't always look like such a wonderful life. I mean, especially if you looked at all the details of his life. It would seem that Potter, who had all the money and the power, well, so it seemed that George didn't have it and that Potter did. But just because Potter had money and riches, it's important to realize that Potter had forfeited his life, even though he'd gained the world, because he'd lost out on honor and truth and true love and joy. He'd given it all away. He'd pushed it away from him. He'd let the greed and the animosity and vengefulness take over his whole being. So in answer to that question about whosoever save his life will lose it, to me I hear Jesus saying that we will give up some of what we think we need in order to help someone else. because that's how we're losing it. That's how we would lose it for his sake. And we're not talking about Jesus, because Jesus is not standing here right with us, but for the sake of the Christ, the thing that Jesus represented, that he expressed, that he tried to show us how to live and be. And so the way that you and I give in return for our life, George answered that as well, if we'll look at it. George gave hope. George gave love and joy and peace and goodness. Those are the things that you and I would give in return for our life. That spiritual life, a life of being that Jesus was speaking of, the eternal life that is real, that is very real within our spirits, within our hearts and being. But like many of us, George couldn't see that at this time of year. Most notably, during the times when things are bleakest, many of us are depressed. And when Bud lost the money, George's whole life seemed to go down the drain. And George got really confused, just as you and I can. When difficult things happen, it's not easy to stay focused. It's not easy to stay unless that life energy has been bolstered through hope, love, joy. It's hard to remember sometimes when you and I need to focus what constitutes a wonderful life. But it was love and hope that set George fully able to let more wonder to fully come through for him, to seeing that he mattered. I think most of us want to feel like we mattered, but seeing the things that he did really did matter that he didn't think did. And we can get really caught up, all of us, in the details and the difficulties of our times, in the times of our lives when we feel so helpless and hopeless. But keep in mind that one of the things that brought George back was a sense of wonder and gratitude and the hope. And so I would say that Jesus asked, what would one give in return? You and I, what would we give? What are we supposed to give? We're giving hope, love, joy, all of these things when we are connecting with another human being, on all the people we care about and people we don't even know, but who we come across in our daily lives. So if this time of year is one that's really tough for you, and for many of us it is, if you're depressing, if it feels depressing, or if you're feeling helpless or hopeless, let me offer this thought. You can get back that sense of hope. You can get back that sense of love and joy by working backwards, so to speak. You and I can develop a sense of gratitude, and thereby also that flow of hope renews itself. I know gratitude is a toughie, but there are some really small things that you and I can do in order to spark that and bring it to life in our lives. So something like practicing kindness, even in just a small way, just some small kindness. But importantly, letting go of what we can't control. And by the way, that's pretty much most of life we don't control. Another thing, listening to your heart and giving when you can. It doesn't have to be much. As a matter of fact, it's not the size of what you give or the cost. It's that you give. Begin to see good in your life. Make a note of it. Write it down. And then in the evening, before you go to bed, review it and let yourself connect to that good. Make a point. This is truly one of the most important things. Make a point to just breathe and get still more often. Really looking for good. Sometimes we need an angel to help us with this. Seek out a gratitude angel to help you with for a week, which means that each day that you communicate with someone who loves and cares for you, and send each other through email or text just 3 things that you're grateful for. And you might even think about wanting to extend that time and finding other gratitude angels. This month is a perfect time to do it because so many of our religions are focusing on wonder. And truly, the religious celebrations we have are about wonder, real wonder. And it's not based on riches or measured in treasures, and it's something that's not found in those things. So at the start of these holy days, I offer you a prayer of 12 angels that I hope you will accept. They come from my heart as a gift to you. I pray for the angel of jubilation to bless you with joy and laughter in abundance. For laughter cures our ills, and joy makes our hearts and spirits soar. I pray for the angel of breath to move you with a sigh when you need one. For a sigh clears the heart like a cough clears the throat, and with a sigh comes acceptance of what we cannot change or control, and letting go of disappointments. I pray for the angel of solace to shower you with tears when you need them. For tears clear the eyes to see heaven and cleanse your soul to let healing begin. I pray the angel of peace hold you in serenity, for fights and wars start in individual hearts, and that's where it must end. I pray for the angel of wisdom to light your choices in every word, deed, and choice. And I pray that the angel of perseverance aid you in patience, for most troubles pass if we wait them out, and success comes with perseverance and persistence. I pray the angel of endurance armor you with courage, for there may be many pitfalls and even sometimes dangers ahead, and problems can only be solved when they are faced. I pray the angel of insight stir you with compassion, for we cannot help others until we understand them, and we cannot understand them until we walk in their shoes. I pray the angel of diligence forge in you a willingness to work, for work turns dreams into reality, whether the dreams are for ourselves and they belong to us, or to someone else that we can help. And I pray the angel of devotion declare for you unwavering faith, for faith shapes our lives and our destiny and draws us closer to God. I pray the angel of anticipation fill your mind full of hope, for hope determines our attitudes, sets our goals, and creates our ideals. And finally, I pray the angel of mercy resonate in you a heart so full of love that every day you must give some away to those whose paths you cross. In closing, I offer this thought. Maria Hoffman said, "You know how you'll eat anything when you're starving? Like you'll go to the grocery store on an empty stomach and you just come home with weird stuff, yeah? Don't go out into the world with an empty soul. You'll fill up on all kinds of crap. Be sure to nourish yourself first." And that was what Maria said. My thoughts are along the same lines. Together, let us, you and I, feed our souls with hope, love, and joy for a wonderful life. God bless you. Thank you for being with me on this beautiful day. May you know the wonder of God.